Thank you, everyone. Thank you. And thank you for coming today. Happy Earth Day, everybody. And happy 48th birthday to Earth Day. Does anybody here remember the first Earth Day? I was a high school student in Minneapolis. I was over at the campus of the University of Minnesota, where the first one was being held. It was an excuse, of course, to get out of school. But Paul Ehrlich spoke, if you remember him, the author of The Population Bomb, which had been published a couple of years before, and we were all mesmerized by his tales of the calamities that lay ahead. And fortunately, not all of them have come to pass yet. It's also a good day to remember that we're orbiting a superheated mass of nuclear explosions at a speed of 67,000 miles an hour on a 4.5 billion year old piece of rock. And miraculous and unlikely as life here in the Goldilocks zone is, it is also, to put it mildly, fragile. If you'll have a chance to look around at all this amazing artwork today, the Thomas Fire is a vivid and very instructive reminder of that. The anguish we all felt seeing our friends and family lose their homes and confronting us with the unthinkable thought that we might lose this valley itself. But we're a resilient species. This is a resilient valley. And thanks to the truly heroic actions of thousands, that didn't happen. And if nothing else, it reminded us all of how deeply we care about this place and how lucky we are to have this special corner of the earth as our home. Think globally, act locally. Now, that wasn't coined at Earth Day or Woodstock. It's actually a phrase that was first spoken by a Scottish town planner in 1915. And as my Scottish grandfather would have said, all the great ideas come from Scotland, laddie. But that idea's never seemed more pertinent. Natural disasters play an oversized part in human history and have been, as we know, a perennial threat to us here in Ojai. It's also a good day to remember that since that first Earth Day, many more frequent threats to our local piece of the planet have been posed by near disasters created by our fellow humans. Threats that would have degraded or even destroyed the valley as a place to live or even to visit. The valley survived, most of these, as you're about to learn, by the skin of its teeth. And some of them are hair-raising. But memories are short, which is arguably a human survival strategy, so it often falls to our storytellers to remind us of the things we need to remember about our shared history. Some of them, like me, we mostly make stuff up. But I happen to have with me today, conveniently, a storyteller uniquely qualified to tell us about that history, an actual historian. In addition to his distinguished 4-decade career as a professor of history at Cal State Northridge, to those of us who know him, John is an indispensable part of this community, a man who embodies the ideal of a concerned and engaged citizen. John, as the saying goes, was woke about these issues before most of us even went to bed. So please join me in welcoming someone I'm very proud to call my friend, John Broesamle.
Thank you, Mark, for that very generous introduction. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good. If I may, I'd like to ask you to hold questions until afterward, in time remaining here at the museum. Because we're going to be taking a train ride, there are 10 or 11 stops, and it's easy to get detoured onto a sideline and never get back onto the main line. Also, we're going to carry on at the mob shop after we've finished here at the museum, and anyone who wishes to continue the conversation or just have some beer is warmly invited to the mob shop next door when we're done. In talking about the travails that the Ojai Valley has faced against massive environmental and development threats, it's well to start with one of the first, because it tells us a very great deal about all the rest. And so we'll pay particularly close attention to this one. And this one was the plan during the 1960s and the early 1970s to plow freeways through the Ojai Valley. By the late 1960s, traffic in the city of Ojai had gotten so bad. Does this sound familiar? Had gotten so bad that the city fathers were considering running a high-speed motorway down the right-of-way that is now the Ojai Valley Trail, just south of Libby Park. Would have had interesting effects on the Ojai Music Festival. But the idea was to bypass the town, get people out of town, get them past the town and out of here quickly. In the meantime, Caltrans, as it's now known and was then known as the State Division of Highways, had even bigger plans for dealing with traffic in Ojai. And that was to build freeways. One would have run from Carpinteria through Ojai and across to the 5, and the other would have started at Foster Park, where the freeway dead-ended, built in the 1950s, and carry it right up to Ojai and possibly as far as Maricopa. The projected opening date for this freeway conflagration was going to be about 1990. Division of Highways insisted that we had to have freeways. It was state policy. The legislature had adopted it. It had been signed by the governor that every town of 5,000 or more must be interconnected with the state freeway system. And it really didn't matter whether local residents wanted to be tied in or not. And when state engineers came to Ojai to talk about it, they were pretty patronizing. This represents progress. You must accept it. You're going to love it. Now get out of the way. One of the routes that Caltrans, the Division of Highways, contemplated, and there were several routes in consideration, one of the routes would have bisected the Ojai Valley Inn's golf course. And the Division of Highways began the process of scoping out and beginning to negotiate land deals in secret, unbeknownst to the citizens of Ojai, until it was all revealed in the Ojai Valley News, and people weren't happy about that. Organized opposition began to develop on the part of local people, notably Citizens to Preserve the Ojai, a legendary organization. There was a mass meeting at Nordhoff High School. This becomes a big theme. Constant mass meetings at Nordhoff High School. The Ojai Valley News joined in the opposition, and the city council, too, led by two people. The young city manager of Ojai in that era, Johnny Johnston, and a brand new member of the city council, James D. Lobel, Jim Lobel. Jim's wife, Dorothy, is right here with us. Jim had run on the traffic issue. There was a plan to bisect the Arbolado with a highway, too. And they lived over there, and it was all, it was all chaos. Where are fast roads and freeways going to go? Or are they? Jim served on the council for the next 28 years and 7 months, and looking back on Ojai's history, I can't think of anyone who's had more impact, anyone arguably who's had as much impact on the shaping of this town or the valley at large since Edward Drummond Libby. No one more impact than James D. Lobel. Well, the upshot of the freeway battle was this. 3 of the 4 freeway routes, Carpinteria to Ojai, Ojai to the 5, north to Maricopa, were scrubbed. They were simply taken off the state master plan. And state code was altered to provide that if a freeway were ever to be built from Foster Park to Ojai, it would have to be with the concurrent approval of the police department, the Ojai City Council, and the Board of Supervisors, meaning that was dead too. Well, what patterns do we see in this fight? Looking at the tea leaves, reading the entrails, certain things come out in high relief. One is, and this is always the story, a powerful outside interest has big plans for the valley, in this case, the Division of Highways. That interest says it knows what's best for Ojai, no matter what Ojai wants. The tendency is always to view Ojai as just one more place in Southern California with no distinctiveness, no uniqueness, at least none you can quantify or put into metrics, so it doesn't matter. There is always a patronizing arrogance. You rustics just don't understand. You don't get it. This is the path of progress, so get on board. The citizenry gets wind of an issue in the air, typically late, and the citizenry insists, no, we are with it, we're just different, we are unique, and we're not just one other piece of Southern California, and we don't want to look like the San Fernando Valley. Citizens rise up, it always happens. It takes masses of people to make this happen. And they organize. Again, typically late, the threat's already there, breathing us in the face before we are ready to confront it. And the press comes on board, and local government joins up, and the fight, in this case and in other cases, goes all the way to Sacramento. State code has to change, or to Washington, D.C., and time after time after time goes to the courts. Finally, in the end, Ojai slays the dragon. Well, having gone into some depth with the freeway fight, let's look at another brilliant idea from the 1960s, the plan to build a city on Lake Casitas. If you go up North Santa Ana Road to its end, you'll see fenced off what looks for all the world like an urban street layout with street signs at a junction you can see and big urban gooseneck light standards. It's the biggest surprise, and yet in the 1960s, Ojai, Lake Casitas, was proposed as a site for 10,000 single-family homes. A city of 25 to 35,000 people, 3 to 4 times the size of today's city of Ojai, would have been the city on Lake Casitas. The idea threatened the safety of the Casitas drinking water as a source. There was no system to purify it, Johnny was just pointing out to me. And there would have been a lot of Scott's turf builder leaking into the lake. It threatened a prime recreational resource. And think of the impact of a city on Lake Casitas now in the midst of our drought. So a local group forms up and it petitions Congress, which votes through the Teague Memorial Watershed, with development banned around the lake. And one of the people who was deeply involved in this fight and went to Washington to help achieve what came out of it, the Teague watershed, was Patricia Weinberger, Pat Weinberger. Anybody, all of us who knew her, knew she was a force of nature. And we knew you didn't ever want to be on the other side. What a wonderful and what a lovable person. But what a fighter. More about Pat shortly. Well, the fights of the 1960s bring to the brilliant ideas for the Ojai Valley that emerged in the 1970s into the 1980s. One was that U.S. Gypsum Company proposed to strip mine phosphates in the Los Padres, back up Highway 33, deep in the National Forest. Consequence for Ojai was going to be 200 one-way truck trips up and down Highway 33, hauling phosphates every day at a time when the valley's air quality was terrible. You're going to be pouring more diesel into it. Smudge pots, Tony, smudging took place routinely in that era. You didn't do it, I know, but everybody else did. And the air was pretty poor. Well, as a side note, the strip mine was also going to leak sulfuric acid into the watershed, but that was just a side note. That was marginal. U.S. Gypsum is America's largest manufacturer of gypsum products, such as sheetrock. This is the giant we were facing. But once again, concerned citizens rise up. 1,800 people attend a single public hearing. And once again, we petition Congress. In the meantime, Pat Weinberger buys shares of stock in U.S. Gypsum, entitling her to attend their annual shareholders meeting in Chicago. And she went, and as only Pat could, raised hell. Must have scared them to death. So the dual approach, Pat in Chicago and petitioning Congress, led U.S. Gypsum to back off, no phosphates. Issue resolved. Very well. How about mining uranium instead? The Homestake Mining Company, one of America's oldest and biggest mining concerns, proposes open pit uranium mining right above Lake Casitas. Pardon me while I bring out my props. A couple of weeks ago, I dropped by the Los Padres Forest Service office, and this is a copy of a map page still on their books. You can hardly see it from here, I know. But let me read what it says. Where the first arrow is on a post-it, Lake Casitas Recreation Area. And just a short distance above that, uranium mining claim. This is what a uranium strip mine looks like. It wouldn't have blended in very well. Where it was going to be was right on Coyote Creek, which feeds directly into the lake. I mean, why not? Estimates at the time were that once the lake was polluted with dust from the open pit mine and runoff from Coyote Creek, it'd take 1 million years to recover. Most of us haven't got that kind of patience. But permits are issued for exploratory excavation. It's starting to happen. And so a group forms up called Stop Uranium Now. Ultimately, it takes congressional legislation and particularly the help of our local Congressman Robert Lagomarsino to bring this proposal to a halt. Congress again, Congress again. About this time, outside development interests seek to construct a big box shopping center north of Nordhoff High School, just adjoining the high school on Maricopa Highway, along with on the backside at Lameda and Besant Road, a 250 condo complex, separate development projects. Orange County, here we come. And the would-be developer of the Maricopa fronting shopping center was from Orange County, from Anaheim to be specific. The condo developers were partners from Santa Barbara. Well, this issue gets debated for a decade and a half. Nordhoff Auditorium gets packed again. You have the feeling that Nordhoff Auditorium never really cools off in these years. And the shopping center battle winds up in court for 7 years. At one point in this saga, I met with the condo developers. And we hit it off. I liked them. I think they liked me. It was nothing personal at all. And by this time, they decided to throw in the towel. They were done. Ojai had whipped them. And they said, you know, we make good investments, we make bad investments, but this was a lousy investment. Well, after more saga and more circumlocution and labyrinthine debate and bad blood, lots of bad blood, what we have emerging from it when the dust settles is the Ojai Meadows Preserve. And the president of the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, which owns the preserve and opens it to the public, is Sandy Bueckley, sitting right here. I still believe, you may disagree, but I believe, at least in my imagination, that when you go over to the Ojai Meadows Preserve and scratch the soil surface, blood oozes up. Jump now, again, we're talking about the 1970s and 80s, to the Upper Ojai. San Francisco area interests. You're noticing a pattern here, it's always outside interests. San Francisco area interests begin wildcatting for oil along Königstein Road. Wildcatting meaning dipping a straw here, 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 and here, looking for oil on private property. In the mid-1970s, a group called Citizens to Preserve the Upper Ojai forms. The key issue that it's concerned about is not wellheads, it's air quality. That the driller's environmental impact report understates the impact on air. And the key figure is a man who all of us who knew him loved, John Whitman. Are any members of the Whitman family here today? It's a wonderful clan. All the members of the Whitman family still live in Ojai or the Upper Ojai. I was talking with one just the other day to help get the story straight. John was a high executive with State Farm. He revolutionized their claim system. In his later years, we all recall, who knew him, that he was deeply involved in Ojai education and in supporting Ojai's public education. But he also happened to have a law degree. And Citizens to Preserve the Upper Ojai filed suit against the San Francisco wildcatters. The state's Republican Attorney General filed a supporting brief in the lawsuit. The Superior Court upheld Citizens to Preserve the Upper Ojai. And this case, Whitman v. Ventura County, ended the wildcatting like that, but went farther. It completely revolutionized California state law where air quality was concerned. It established standards for the entire state. It was a landmark case in California law. And this landmark case set the groundwork, inadvertently, but laid the groundwork for the next big fight of the 70s and 80s over the Petrochem oil refinery. Jump from the upper Ojai down to the other end, just outside the valley beyond Casitas Springs. You know it. You know exactly where it is. You drive by it. We all do all the time, or what remains of it. The refinery had been there for some time. It had begun as a shell chemical plant, had become an oil refinery, and was sending effluent up the valley. It proposed to double its size, which would have meant sending more pollution up the valley. And so local opponents formed up and defeated that expansion based on the precedent just set in Whitman v. Ventura County. From one end of the valley to the other end of the valley, that precedent held twice in a row. Ultimately, the refinery closed and sits there rotting away, rusting away. I went over the other day with my wife, Kathy, and we sat there for a while and watched it rot and rust. It frankly didn't change much. And then we came home again. Bad ideas from the 1990s. The Farmont and a subsequent development proposal in the vicinity of Lake Casitas, Rancho Matilaha, and the Ventura River came forward for a 200-acre golf course and approximately 1,600 acres of large homes on large properties. These would have been erected right along the waterway that feeds the lake from the Ventura River, fronting on that waterway. And each of these properties, 12 or 13 of them, would have been an 80-acre parcel. I went over and talked with the attorney representing the final development proposal and the developer, who again was from out of state. And I said, please show me what the latest version of this is. He said, you know, it's interesting. What we're going to have is 12, 13 homes facing the waterway, and they're going to be on 80-acre lots that go straight back north to south. So your 80 acres would have been configured like a bowling lane. You know, this little narrow stripe, this ribbon, a stripe in the American flag with your house on the waterway. Well, that posed a threat to the quality of water in Lake Casitas, you know, more Scott's turf builder leaching into the lake. But it also threatened permanent loss of potential public access to 1,600 acres of open space. After the long legal battle to stop this had ended, after it ended, the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, under the leadership and the presidency of Jim Jackson, right here, bought those 1,600 acres with a state grant of $3 million and raising $750,000 from the community. And now what we have is 1,600 acres in the Ventura River Preserve, open to public access by foot, by horseback, and it's stunning, and it would have been lost. Meanwhile, I'm sorry, a regional landfill is proposed, serving Los Angeles and much of Southern California, along with Ventura County, just south of the Ojai Valley, near the Petrochem refinery, near Foster Park. If you get off of the Cañada Larga exit, go into the freeway, and look northeast, you're looking up in the direction of Weldon Canyon. Weldon Canyon was designed by God in the shape of a landfill. It was meant to be a dump. It's perfect. And so Waste Management, Inc. proposed to fill it with garbage. Waste Management, Inc. is the largest trash company in the world. Now, once again, this is another theme. Key issue is air quality. Now, what is this going to mean, having a dump and trash trucks continually going in and out for our air? Hundreds of trash trucks, constant deposition of trash. How serious a threat is this? Waste management assured us there was nothing to worry about. You've got Sulphur Mountain there. I mean, that's going to bottle it out. It's going to keep it back. You're fine. You're protected. Enter Carl Hunsinger. How many of you knew Carl? What a man. He was a citrus grower in Ojai, but came from one of Ventura County's famous oil service company families. His family had been successful in oil. Their company is now an international company, Vetco. Carl, all of us who knew him will recall, was a person who analyzed everything, very analytical, engineer's mind, thought things through, and so he started neutral on the issue of the dump. So how to find out? Is it going to pollute or isn't it going to pollute? That was simply the question. Carl commissioned a study and either paid for it or he and a group of others paid for it, some $50,000, to hire an environmental company to float weather balloons from Weldon Canyon up in the air with measuring instruments for air quality and see where they went. And where they went was here, straight here, up and over, right down into the valley. The impact on our air quality was going to be horrible. And at that point, Carl becomes one of the leaders in the battle against Weldon Canyon. Well, the upshot is complicated, but to summarize, 2,000 people protest at Nordhoff High School. Various groups form in opposition, the most famous of which is Stop Weldon Canyon, which is made up of hundreds of local citizens who take waste management to court. Their motto, and it's on bumper stickers all over the place, is Dump Weldon. And there's a skull. Just in case you didn't get the message, the bumper sticker has a skull on it. It takes years, but ultimately, the Weldon Canyon landfill, by a hairbreadth, very complicated process, is defeated. By the end of the 1990s, it's over, but the cost for us here has been, in today's dollars, close to $1 million to kill that thing. In 2007, massive gravel hauling begins through the Ojai Valley. I mean, not the usual occasional gravel truck, but lots of them. People begin to complain about split windshields and scored paint following these things up or down Highway 33. And in fact, this is just the beginning, because the plan in store is that there'll be up to 800 one-way trips up and down Highway 33 and across 150 hauling gravel in truck and trailer combos. The source is 3 mines up in the Ojai Valley, one on the Ventura County side of the line, 2 others on the Santa Barbara County side of the line. And once again, as always, with these trucks up and down, up and down, up and down, the biggest issue is air quality. But there's another issue this time as well, and that is just pure safety. Highway 33 was built for automotive traffic in the early 1930s. These double hopper trucks have to come through the tunnels up there, and they can't in one lane. So they have to take a lane and a half So bicyclists who are struggling up Highway 33 under those tunnels, and all of a sudden, these things come around the corner, heading straight for them, and we start to get bad reports in Ojai of near misses, and people scared to death. Same with cars. Not only that, the trucks pass Ojai Community Hospital and also Nordoff High. People are turning in, dropping off the kids are turning in, neophyte drivers are turning in. It's a big hazard. So restricted hours are imposed. These trucks can't go by while school is assembling. And so they do something else. To avoid detection, they turn off around the deer lodge and start rumbling down residential streets to get past the high school and back down toward Ventura. Some people found that objectionable. And as usual, a group forms up called Stop the Trucks. Is Michael Shapiro here by any chance? Michael? I wish he were. Michael had been a leader in the Weldon Canyon fight. He'd been the great stentorian voice of that battle, and much of the brains as well. And in this case, he and Howard Smith formed Stop the Trucks, which has an exclamation mark in its name. Stop the Trucks! And eventually, Stop the Trucks succeeds. But in succeeding, their success calls into question the old model of fighting these onslaughts, one after another after another. The old model was to get wind of the onslaught, typically late, to form up a group, typically behind the curve, and to start to struggle for $1 and supporter one from scratch. And that realization began to rankle Jerry Michaels. Jerry here? Wish he were. Char was here, yeah. And out of Jerry's insight, something important is born for the present. Insight comes in a funny way. Jerry's watching a movie called 300. It's about the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC, where 300 Spartans hold off 10,000 Persians who are trying to invade Greece. And Jerry asked himself, where are our Spartans? And how do we create them? His epiphany out of that insight is we could create a standing legal defense fund for the Ojai Valley that would cover our entire region, Königstein Road, right down to Casita Springs. It would be a community chest that would be in place in preparation, anticipation of these fights beforehand. It would be in place, and if it were large enough, it might discourage onslaughts. And in any case, if it didn't succeed in discouraging them, it could contend with them. It could confront them and defeat them. The idea began with a $500,000 war chest, community chest, and grew to $1 million. The Ojai Valley Defense Fund was what came out of Jerry's insight and his epiphany, and it was launched in September 2009. 2009, it went public. Its presence helped give the mines a final nudge. It was one final push, and the timing was good. We launched in September. In October, I got a call from the consultant for the Ventura County mine, and he said, in the most appealing and warm voice, "Hi, I'd like to talk with you." About that time, Michael Shapiro was meeting with the head of one of the mines in Santa Barbara County, and he said, look, enough, we give up. You're stalling us, you're dragging it out. Time is money. We'll ship our product north. We'll stay out of the Ojai Valley. So 2 mines agreed to other routes, and the third mine went out of business and is now a redevelopment site, restoration site. At the time, this idea of a defense fund seemed, well, unusual. In fact, we couldn't then and don't know now of any exact counterpart nationally. But it's gained acceptance and recognition, including a very nice discussion of what we do in the brand new Ojai Valley and Illustrated History, which is published by the museum. So it's appreciated that I think we've become something of a fixture in the community, and we're certainly a fixture for the community, and have been able to step pretty centrally into an issue pending now, right now, pending 2016 to 2020 at least, where Ventura County is undertaking a 4-year review and update of its general plan. Now, what's the concern there? It sounds like, bureaucratic falderall, something going on behind gray desks and gray offices, and it is. But it's very dangerous. It's very concerning because there's been serious talk within county bureaucracy of doing something to laws and policies we just take for granted here. There are special air quality standards for the Ojai Valley that are 5 times higher than for the county at large because of where we are. We're in a bowl. Remember the fire? It's all around us. The smoke, the respirators, the masks. But the idea is, and you hear this said, it'd just be fairer. Why do those people in Ojai have special privilege? Let's provide the same standards for everybody. People in Ojai and people along the coast where ocean breezes waft about and send the air elsewhere. A lot of it up here. There's also concern that other special environmental regulations having to do with traffic, development, you name it, might also come subject to being reduced, eliminated. Sources inside county government tell us to be very worried about this. It all seems so quiet, mice nibbling behind doors, but it's very threatening. And so in response, the Ojai Valley Defense Fund has awarded a grant of $50,000 and the city of Ojai a grant of $25,000 to Citizens for Responsible Oil and Gas, CFROG. This is today's frontline organization. The Defense Fund is the banker with the city for tracking the county general plan update through a highly regarded environmental law firm that CFROG has engaged to do so. The firm is raising red flags and providing legal advice by the week, continually getting feedback. Here's what's going on, here's what to watch out for. Here's something you've got to contest. Over the past 50 years, this battle over the area plan and the county general plan makes for battle number 11, an average of about 2 per decade, and they just seem to roll around like a clock mechanism. I mean, it's so predictable. Historians don't believe in predictability, but this has an odd rhythm to it. It's subtle, but it's massive. The threat is every bit as real, although less exciting than gravel trucks rolling through here at the rate of 800 a day, or a uranium mine above Lake Casitas.
Thank you, John. I told you it was hair-raising. I was just sitting here listening, and I thought of 2 movies. One, famously, Paddy Chayefsky's Network. We're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. It's like all the people from the movie moved to Ojai. The other one is one that's set all sorts of box office records this very year. The Black Panther, the nation of Wakanda, protected by an invisible shield from the outside world. It reminded me of the Ojai Valley, and it reminded me of the remarkable citizenry we have here who are willing to buck all these trends and stand up for ourselves as individuals and as a community against these kind of forces. One of humanity's great dilemmas has always been how incredibly sensitive we are to threats that are right in front of us. We can see the tiger in the grass over there, and we know how to react appropriately, run like hell. The problem is the tiger on the next hill. We might even know it's out there, but if we don't see it, we tend to ignore it. So while we may not end up as lunch, there's a pretty good chance we're still on the menu for dinner. For 50 years, the Valley has faced these massive threats, and the Ojai we know today exists only because of this history of ordinary people standing up and saying, those bulldozers, that uranium mine, that regional garbage dump, those gravel trucks are not going to happen here. We've raised hell. We've gone to Sacramento. We've gone to Washington. And above all, we've gone to court. We've set legal precedents for the entire state, primarily for air quality, and we've done it irrespective of political stripe or inclination, knowing we all breathe the same air and drink the same water. As your old friend Jim Lobel used to say, what we have here is unique and irreplaceable. And because the Ojai Valley is a treasure, it is worth protecting. So it falls to us, future generations, to continue to think globally, but act locally. Thanks everybody for coming today. We wanted to invite you all, if you'd like to continue the conversation, to come next door and have a glass of beer, have a snack, talk to us at the mob shop, and keep on keeping on. Thanks a lot.